Hi guys, I'm Mike, and this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back to another episode of F1 Legacies. Today we look at Michael Schumacher. 307 race starts, 7 drivers' world title, a record, 91 victories, a record, 68 pole positions, 155 podiums, a record, and 77 fastest laps, a record. When you talk about Schumacher, history follows. This is his legacy. So, F1 Legacies, we've had a couple in the series before. We've looked at Charlie Whiting and Sterling Moss as of last week. Now we look at Michael Schumacher, and joining me today, very welcome to welcome on the show, is Rob from Everything Racing podcast. So Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. It's a real pleasure.
No problem at all. And no doubt you came across, I believe this came from a message popped up. Obviously, listened to each other's stuff, and you were like, I'd love to do something. And then obviously when we talk, a discussion happened, and with you being a big fan of Schumi, it seemed a natural place to kind of talk, and the F1 Legacy seems a perfect place to kind of talk about Michael Schumacher today.
Yep, no, absolutely. Yep, no, I saw that. I think you'd had a conversation with a lad called Jason about Schumacher, and I thought, I'd love to get involved and have a chat about Michael's career. It's something that I've followed almost my whole life. So, yeah, no, I'm excited to chat about Michael Schumacher.
It should be an absolutely amazing chat. So, what we'll try and do is we'll probably look and go through chronological order of Michael's career. So I suppose the only place we can start off, we'll stick to the F1 basis, and that is 1991, where Michael Schumacher fills in for Jordan, and he's at Spar, and he sets a qualifying lap that kind of shocks everyone, beats his more experienced teammate, and qualifies 7th of the day. But it was really something that kind of announced, and people were like, oh, who's this kid? What are your thoughts on that qualifying lap at Spar, Rob?
I mean, the thing was, I don't think he'd ever raced at Spar either, and it was obviously his first time in a Formula 1 car. So to jump in, put the car 7th on the grid, I mean, that isn't down to like the car so much, that was him. So yeah, you're right, it really was something that sort of like introduced him in such a spectacular way. No wonder Benetton were keen to get him in. Also, his arrival into F1 was really quite big for German Formula 1 fans. Like 25,000 Germans turned up like on the gate at Spa, which weren't expected. So they were treated to one hell of a quali lap from Michael. And yeah, it's just a shame that his race just didn't pan out. Obviously, he had the clutch issues on the opening lap. But as far as his quali lap, I think even if Michael had finished in the points, his quali lap said it all. It did more than points probably ever could.
Absolutely. And I think I always remember his post-quali interview as well. He was just this excited young lad. He was bouncing around. You could just, even at that early stage, just tell this kid absolutely loves Formula 1 and he loves racing. Like, he was absolutely buzzing. I mean, I'm not surprised if I had even a smidgen of the talent of what Schumacher had, and had just kind of gone and put in my first ever outing in a Formula 1 car and put the car in 7th, I would be absolutely bouncing off the walls. And I think that really came across in that post-quali lap interview. But yeah, like you said, a real shame that the race didn't pan out to anything more than a retirement.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I do wonder where he would have finished. I think, who knows? It's one of those questions you can't answer. But yeah, no, that post-qualifying interview, like you said, yeah, you're right. He just, it's weird. He looks so fresh-faced and so young. Obviously, he was around for a very long time. So yeah, no, it is quite a cool interview. In that, you're right. He just looks so excited. And who knows, he probably didn't even know himself what was to come even in like a few weeks' time at Monza when he moved to Benetton. So,
and that is probably the perfect point to move on to, because there was, unsurprisingly, with a top talent, controversy follows during Michael's career, and I'm sure we'll discuss during this a number of kind of Michael's controversial moments. But that was the first one in terms of the contract, wasn't it, with Jordan. But Flavio got it all sorted, and he would go on and join Benetton, and that certainly would prove a kind of really decisive decision for him, especially for his early part of his career.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you have to wonder if it stayed with Jordan for the remainder of 1991. You have to think it probably had gone to a top team. Whether it was Benetton for 92, it's hard to say for sure. But yeah, no, that move across to Flavio Briatore's team was one of the most important moments of his career. And it's weird to think that happened so soon into his career, literally after one race.
Yeah. It is crazy, and obviously it's the beauty of now looking back at such a great career of hindsight, where you go, oh, they didn't know what was to come. if a contract dispute was the least of the kind of worries.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Now, who was it? I can't remember who was the driver that got shafted out of Benetton, but I feel bad for him. he was he thought he was guaranteed a seat for the remainder of 91, but in comes this fresh-faced kid who just takes his seat, but to be fair, made more of an impact than I think was it. I know PK was in the other seat, but I can't remember who the other driver.
I'm trying to. I had some notes down here. I've missed that one, but yeah, no, the poor guy was shafted. I'm sure someone in the comments below will be able to help us out and drop that one. But yes, no, Benetton would, he would impress in the 92 season. I believe Benetton actually came third in the championship that year, and there were some standout performances from him even so early on. I mean, just watching, we've been doing, I know you are going to do on your podcast to look back at some of these classic races that happened in F1, and one of the ones we looked at was, well, for a different reason, it was obviously Mansell and Senna that kind of shone the highlight, but Michael, in only his 12th race and his first time at Monaco, had pretty much a race-long battle with very experienced Riccardo Patrese in that one as well, and that was fascinating to watch him really pushing the experienced Brazilian all the way round the streets of Monaco.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Michael became very comfortable with the streets of Monaco, obviously taking 5 wins across his career. I mean, I remember the early part of 92. He comes 4th in South Africa, which is a nice solid start, obviously finishing behind the 2 Williamses and Senna. And then just consistently pumps in podiums. Like, I think he finished 2nd in Spain in like a torrentially wet race. He's got his first podium in Mexico. Then he has that battle with Senna at Brazil, the one where he got very angry with Senna during the race and afterwards, because Senna kept basically letting Michael through, but then just getting the toe and then just go straight back through, kind of playing with him a little bit. But Michael still got the podium. So yeah, that first period of 92, especially considering he was still so young, and 12 races into his career come Monaco, he's fighting for that's against Patrese, which is quite something, especially so early in his career. Again, Michael just continued to slowly show everybody, hey, whilst maybe Mansell and Senna are going to be taking the wins consistently for now, you just wait, I'm coming.
Absolutely, and I think 92 was a season that he showed the promise. 93, I think, with Benetton was a bit of a stall year, but 94, wow, that was really the year where Michael Schumacher announced to the world, I am a top talent. And
absolutely. I mean, I'm gonna raise it how much of that was down to the secret traction control in the Benetton, but obviously Michael had to drive the car, and the traction control thing is obviously a bit of a controversial one. But straight away in Brazil, battling Senna pushing too hard, forces, he makes a mistake. Schumacher wins by at least a minute over everybody else. So 94 was a massive season for Michael in both good ways and in bad ways.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we can't talk about 94 without the prospect of, when we talk about great driver rivalries, the previous one before that was between Prost and Senna. And we've already talked a couple of times throughout this of the what ifs with, Michael Schumacher and Ayrton Senna. What if that 1994 season, it was the birth of a different rivalry in the Hill and Schumacher, which we'll talk about. But, sadly with the passing of Senna at Imola in that, tragic accident, it's something that is left for F1 fans to debate. What if Senna had raced the entire season? What a battle that might have been. We'd already seen the sparks and the fireworks between them pushing each other, because Senna, like you said, playing around with Schumacher in previous races, and Schumacher had really pushed Senna in that Williams that wasn't as dominant as what it had been in the previous season in 1993. It was almost, we were left searching and hoping for more, probably.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, you're dead right. I mean, we kind of got a few glimpses of what potentially could have been that epic rivalry. My first thoughts would go to France 92, where Michael completely punted into Senna at the hairpin on the opening lap, and then there's that famous confrontation during a red flag period where Senna just comes up to Michael and says, "You can't do stuff like that," and Michael's literally looking at him just like, all right, yep, no worries, yep, that's fine. Like, he doesn't seem to care too much. And then throughout 93 they would battle quite a bit. I think they had a bit of a coming together at South Africa in 1993, and Michael got past Senna pretty convincingly at Silverstone. Prost had spent most of the opening part of that race stuck behind Senna, and Senna and Prost then got through eventually, but Michael made it look quite easy and got it done really quickly, which I think was fairly emphatic of almost not a passing of the guard almost in that instance, but it was very much when you get these two in top machinery, it's going to be feisty. But we sadly never really got it. But for 94, I've always kind of had this gut feeling that if Senna hadn't have passed away and, like you said, raced a full season, I still think Senna probably would have slightly edged Schumacher across that season, because just down to the fact that Williams was a horrible car to drive, but he still stuck it on pole 3 times, which is very, very impressive considering the issues that Senna was having with it. He was still quick enough to beat Michael. Well,
I think we have to think with that, Senna was coming to the top and peak end of his career. He'd learned, he'd got all this experience. He'd driven against some absolutely brilliant drivers in his time. The Nelson Piquets, the Nigel Mansells, the Alain Prosts, of course. He'd driven against some absolutely fantastic rivals and culminated all that experience. 3-time world champion himself. You just feel it's the bit that I kind of look to today. If it went really down to the narrow wire, I still think Lewis Hamilton would edge out Max Verstappen, just because you can't really replace that experience when the kind of top guys have still got it.
I completely agree. And obviously, as we go into 94, through various things throughout that year, Michael did show several signs of mental weakness, and we'll get to them, I'm sure. But I completely agree that you got to look at that experience, and Senna at that point was just the king, wasn't he? He was just undisputed the number one. And but I suspect how long that would have lasted for, going into the years after 94, not just 94. I mean, who knows? But unfortunately, because of Senna's passing, we can't really say as for definite what would have happened, unfortunately. But yeah,
exactly like we said at the start of that, it is one that's kind of refined to what ifs. But a rivalry we didn't get, a rivalry was born this year, an unexpected one, I think, for a lot of people, in terms of the form of Damon Hill taking up the mantelpiece. Obviously, he narrowly missed out on the title, and Schumacher was able to go on and complete that. But it was closer than probably a lot of people would have thought and given Damon credit for.
No, absolutely. I mean, to be fair, there was a fairly heavy assist in that Michael got disqualified from 2 races and banned from 2 races. So that's essentially 4 races where Michael could have potentially scored 40 points. Well, he did win at Spar, got disqualified there, came second at Silverstone, got disqualified, was banned for 2 races. So potentially there's like 36 points that Michael could have scored, which obviously would have made the championship not even remotely close come the finish. But yeah, Damon Hill really stepped up. I mean, that's why he became so loved by not just the British public, but by people all over the world, because the guy was literally in probably the most unenviable position imaginable. You stepping into the number 1 role, you're replacing Ayrton Senna as the number 1 in Williams, who were the number 1 team at the time, undoubtedly. And he was still young, in terms of his racing career, not necessarily in age. So this was only his 2nd full season. And Damon handled it brilliantly. He really showed what he was made of in 94. Yeah, but definitely an unexpected rivalry. It was definitely expected to be Schumacher and Senna.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think probably we'll go for a first kind of standout race on this podcast. And that would be the 1994 Spanish Grand Prix, and a kind of standout performance by Michael. He was leading the race early, and he looked like he was going to go on and dominate this race, but he got his car stuck in 5th gear, and so he then had to suddenly nurse this car in 5th gear round for the rest of the Grand Prix.
It's amazing. Like, if you've ever seen the onboard footage of Michael, like you say, nursing this Benetton round the circuit in 5th, it is amazing. Like the effort it must have been to work the car in such a way. I mean, to be fair, the circuit of Catalonia at this point wasn't a slow circuit. I think if you're going to get stuck in any gear around there, 5th is probably the best one, because you could still kind of go relatively quick on the straights, but then it wasn't probably as difficult completely impossible in the medium speed slower stuff. I mean, the only part of the circuit which was outright slow was a mobile chicane of tyre barriers which they stuck up around the middle of the circuit to slow the cars down. But it is just fantastic how Michael was able to just hustle this thing in a similar way that Senna did at Brazil in 91. Michael did it for a longer period of time, still came second, and if anything, Hill won the race, but Michael was truly, I feel like, the quote-unquote real winner of that Grand Prix for the effort that he had to put in just to bring the thing home.
Well, I think it's certainly a race that he has won many plaudits for, and if you think of kind of greatest Schumacher races, it's one that usually comes up on a list, because it's literally dealing with a car that is broken and still competing at a high level, and finishing second is definitely a very high level. It doesn't matter whether, like we said, with the disqualifications and everything, and obviously being eventual winner, the traction control coming in there, but it's still an immense effort, really, that he was managed to even complete the race. Most drivers would have usually retired with this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I was literally thinking the same thing. The only modern equivalent I can think of was Daniel Ricciardo at Monaco in 2018. How he was able to nurse the Red Bull to victory. I mean, to be fair, he had the advantage of it was at Monaco, so overtaking is nigh on impossible anyway. But yeah, for the effort that Michael had to put in just to, like you say, bring the car home, still secure 6 points for second. Yeah, you're right. It's one of, you think of a top 10 list of Michael's greatest drives. Yeah, it's on there. It has to be. It's just an awesome effort.
Absolutely incredible. And it was the birth. Like I said, it's amazing looking back at that footage, and just, you said it earlier when we spoke about seeing him in that first interview of the 1991 quali lap, and seeing that fresh-faced Michael just full of excitement and winning that title. I remember, we spoke about Jason and seeing him talk about Schumacher, hearing him talk about Schumacher, and it was very much, every time he got on that podium, it was just a celebration. It was just such an eruption of joy, is probably the best way to describe it.
Definitely. I completely agree with that. I think Michael never lost perspective of what a race win or a podium was. Like, it was always special. I mean, you look at podium ceremonies these days, and sometimes the drivers, unless it's like an underdog performance coming and getting a podium, sometimes drivers just look a little bit bored, especially when things haven't worked out in the race for them, strategy calls or whatever, and they just look miserable. There's only one race I can think where Michael didn't look anything other than euphoric, and that was when the race he'd won when his mum passed away the same day, and obviously that's completely understandable why you wouldn't want to be jumping around. But yeah, you're right, Michael was just always very, very appreciative of the fact that he was able to win a Grand Prix thanks to the people around him, and he was always so quick to celebrate with his team as well. It wasn't just about himself, which made every race win, all 91 of them, feel really special.
And it was certainly one of those trademark things that for me defines Michael's career. But like we said, winning that first championship, the first one is always special, and the first one that asserted himself, he had become what few dream of, a champion of the world. He had achieved a life goal so early, and it was really, the start of the journey. But back then, I don't think he would have even dared to assume the heights that he would go to. So I imagine an incredibly special moment for him. But is there anything you would like to kind of add to the 1994 season?
Yeah, I mean, 94 is a difficult season to talk about in general, just because of the events that took place at Imola, and then people continued to crash and get hurt throughout the year, and then obviously the controversy, the British Grand Prix where Michael got black flagged but supposedly didn't see it, didn't come in, etc., got disqualified, and then obviously Adelaide with Damon Hill. It's this. You're right. Obviously, winning a world championship is very special. As much as I'm a diehard Michael Schumacher fan and have been since I was 6 years old, I always kind of look at 94 as that one world championship that I potentially kind of. It's not an asterisk, but it's kind of just like a slight raise of the eyebrows, just kind of because I don't like what Michael did at Adelaide so much. I think it's just not a good way to win a world championship. In the same way that Senna winning his world championship in 1990 at Suzuka, I don't think that's the right way to win a world championship. Different circumstance, but sort of similar actions. But yeah, 94 for me, it's a very solid season for Michael. Like I said, psychologically, he probably wasn't completely there. I don't think he quite expected to have Damon Hill challenge him quite as much at certain points of the year, especially like at Silverstone, for example. But I think 95, and we're obviously going to get onto that in a sec, I think that's the season where Michael truly arrived.
Absolutely. And so we move on to 1995. Michael Schumacher's second world championship he wins this year, and this for me is probably when the rivalry between Hill and Schumacher, I mean, the spark that ignited this fire came, you mentioned it there, at the Adelaide finale, where obviously I said it's not the way that you kind of look at someone you'd want them to win a world championship that way. And 1995 was kind of marred with collisions and interviews between him and Damon Hill of one blaming the other of who was at fault for the incident. And yeah, they were two guys who were just pushing themselves, weren't they?
Absolutely. I do think, in a way, the press, especially the British press, built, and like they tend to do even up to today, they like to make a story. They always like to have a hero and a villain, preferably the British hero and the foreign villain. And Michael played that role. But the thing was, always found this way, the British press don't like it when they're, the villain itself is better than the hero at what they're doing. And Michael in 95 proved that, yeah, whilst there was the controversy the year before, there was no real controversy in how 95 went down. There were collisions inflicted by Damon Hill this time, which kind of not balanced themselves out, but I think kind of helped in terms of, I guess in a way, balancing it out. Because yeah, Silverstone, Hill attempts a silly lunge on Schumacher that was never on, and they both went out, so that made Hill look a little bit daft. That wasn't Michael's fault. And then Monza, Hill punted Michael out of the race at the second chicane. So it's 95, the rivalry was certainly at its most intense. I never once felt that, looking back on it, I was only 4, so I didn't watch it at the time, but I never once felt that they hated each other in the same way that maybe Prost and Senna hated each other at their absolute peak of their rivalry. But yeah, it was fiery. It was fiery, not helped by the media kind of bigging it up even more.
No, I think it's one, especially on hindsight, that they both reflect on and respect. Damon probably more so in terms of looking on what Michael would go on and achieve in the sport. And I just think they were two guys who desperately wanted it. And Hill, to me, is that Rosberg-esque figure coming up against a once-in-a-generation talent, but realising that he's in the machinery, that he's capable of winning a world championship. So he is going to fight absolutely tooth and nail. And I think that's what it was. It wasn't anything nasty. It wasn't anything cynical. It was a fight. It was a proper scrap. And I think that's why, obviously, like you said, pumped up a bit by the media, but there was just some enthusiasm to it. There was kind of some enjoyment behind the rivalry as well.
Absolutely, I agree with that completely. I think the best rivalries in sport, not just motorsport, but in sport, are spurred on by the fact that, there is a respect between the two. You don't have to be best friends. You don't have to have a pint together, but you can respect each other for what you do, in terms of, your race, you're racing, wheel to wheel against each other. They certainly didn't give each other any favours. I think it's Spar in 95 where Hill's trying to get past Michael. I think it's wet and Michael's still on slicks, or the other way around, and Michael literally is just hanging Hill to dry like everywhere, like giving him no space, and Hill was, I'd imagine, getting very frustrated, but it never once came across as like Michael's deliberately trying to take Hill off the circuit. It's just hard racing. And I think you're right that there was almost like a level of enjoyment between the two, especially for Michael, because Michael, you're right in that Hill is, if you're looking at it from the Hamilton-Rosberg perspective, Hill was the Rosberg in this situation. Schumacher was the Hamilton. So Michael probably knew deep down that, whilst Hill might get me here and there, I am going to take it across the long term. Yeah,
and we'll talk about Belgium, actually, bringing that up, because this is probably the race I'll bring up in terms of that season as well, because he qualified 16th on that day. And we mentioned it earlier, obviously, him in his first qualifying position at Spar. Belgium really became a home for Schumacher in terms of a lot of his greatest ever races came at Spar, and especially in the changeable conditions in the mountains where rain would influence the races. That is where Schumacher really came alive. And that Belgian performance, like you said, Michael battling Hill for so long, when Schumacher was still on slicks, and Hill wasn't, and being there, but he still went on to win that race by 20 seconds, and I think that shows the dominance of Schumacher in changeable conditions.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I always remember thinking that Michael's charge through the field was the most impressive part of that performance, in that it was just so quick and clinical. Like, he just didn't mess around. He was literally passing people like practically every single lap for like the first 15 odd laps, and then like the weather changed and Michael found himself ahead. He stayed on slicks. Hill came in. It was an inspired decision to stay out, because in the end the rain wasn't staying around, and everyone else, especially including Hill, dived in for wets. Michael was like, if I can just weather the storm, no pun intended, and he ended up being the right call. It was fantastic racecraft as well as a fantastic strategy call, combined with just amazing defensive driving. Aggressive, but I think at no point was it unfair. It was always fair defense. And yeah, you're right. If again, like with Spain, you're looking at a top 10 list of Michael's greatest drives. Yeah, Belgium 95 for sure is on there. It's a fantastic recovery, and it was at a time where recovery drives such as 16th to 1st didn't happen that often. It was normally at a time where you had drivers starting in the first two rows and they would be your race winners. I literally can't remember the last time someone, maybe Mansell in the late 80s when he was at Ferrari, might have started like 11th or 12th at Hungary and won, or something like that. But yeah, Michael was just on another level that day.
He absolutely was, and like I said before, there were many times that you could say Schumacher was on another level in Spar, in changeable conditions, and that is the mark. The rain is often described as the great leveller between drivers. The machinery matters less. It is all about survival, and driving instinct comes in, and the best rise to the top. Senna, obviously, noted as one of, if not the greatest in the rain, and Schumacher is definitely in that conversation as well. But you mentioned it at the start of when we went into 95, where 94, marred by controversy, claiming that first title in 1994 in the fashion that he did. In 1995, he won 9 of the 17 races, so that's over 50%, and was on the podium for 11 of them. And that was to show the level that he would go on in his Ferrari dominance days, of when he had the car beneath him, and the confidence, the consistency and ruthlessness of maximising his advantage was clear for all to see.
Yep, again, you're spot on. I've always felt 95, you look at his really strong season, you look at all the seasons across his career, which were the strongest, and 95 is certainly, maybe top 5 strongest seasons he ever had. Yeah, 9 wins, 11 podiums. At that point, he tied the record with Mansell 92 with 9 wins. I mean, he won. I think he did win 9 races on the road, at least in 94, but one was taken away. So, 95 is a fantastic season for Michael. You mentioned a moment ago, and I didn't raise on it, Spar in the wet. Yeah, again, you Spar is always normally fairly wet at the best of times. So yeah, Michael was just undisputed king of Spar, and that became very apparent that throughout his career that there was this connection between Michael and Spar. It was weird how all the major things happened at Spar for him across his career, but especially in the wet. I mean, there's a few couple of wins at Spar in the wet, races of that he raced in the wet at Spar, which he was just awesome at. So yeah, you're right. But 95, cracking season. Yeah, one of Michael's strongest.
And that would then close the chapter on Michael's Benetton days. And I think a few had kind of heard it coming. There were rumours of him talking to Ferrari, and then suddenly it had come true. He had joined the great prancing horse team, a car that, in the hands of Jean Alesi was improving and, had kind of pushed in seasons. But Ferrari were this kind of stumbling giant. They had the resources, they had the name, but they hadn't won a championship since 1979. And it it epitomised the hunger and ambition of Michael for me, of wanting to last a legacy. So I think we'll talk about 96 and 99 as a group of seasons of that kind of Prix of where they got it together. And 96, I think we have to talk about that first Ferrari win in Spain in the rain.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Before we do that, I want to talk about his qualifying lap at Monaco.
Oh, of course,
as well,
we'll jump in.
It's just holy moly. Like, I always think that was the best quali lap for like over 20 years until Hamilton's pole lap at Singapore in 2018. That lap at Monaco in 96 is just insane. I mean, he was down by 2 tenths at the end of the second sector. That Ferrari was not a good car to drive. Michael was not having a particularly fun time trying to set that thing up and develop it. And Hill in that year's Williams was just, again, he got the machinery he needed to truly be at the front, and his main rival was now trying to get back to that level with a new challenge. So it all kind of lined up perfectly for Hill. But Michael still beat him to pole by half a second. I mean, it is insane. Like, that final sector is just unbelievable, where he found 7 tenths to go half a second overall quicker than Hill. It's just amazing. Unfortunately, his race went to complete pot within half a lap, so less said about that, the better. But moving on to Spain 96. What more can you say about that performance? It's just amazing. Like, absolutely, yeah. For me, personally, Michael's greatest ever drive. It is just extraordinary.
I think it is the one that it is number one of the list of pretty much any Schumacher fan or any F1 fan when asked what Schumacher's list. It just absolutely incredible drive. After that poor start, falling back to 6th, just from then on in, it was a masterclass in the rain. And what more can you say?
Your words fail you, mate. Because it's true. It isn't. I really hope that with what F1 at the moment are doing with the F1 rewinds, that we get to watch that in full. Like, people can sit down en masse and watch this together and just appreciate. When we say it is just an insane performance, we're not joking. It is incredible. Like, the fact that, you're right, he had a horrible start. He dropped down the order down to 6th or 7th or whatever, and he came through so quickly, so clinically, like he did at Spar. But the weather was just unbelievable. Like, if it rained like that nowadays, the race wouldn't even start. And he passes a Lacey for second. A few laps later, whilst Hill's spinning off multiple times, having an absolute horror show, Michael's passed Villeneuve and disappears up the road. I mean, I think that the lead goes over 70 seconds. The Ferrari then, because that year's Ferrari was not particularly reliable, and I'm fairly sure at least it lost at least one cylinder, like, before the end of the race, so he had to back off. But he still finished like 45 seconds ahead of Villeneuve. Came second, Lacey or Villeneuve. Oh, it's just incredible. He was like 4 seconds a lap faster constantly in such tricky conditions, in a tricky car to drive. That was, if you're ever looking for a display of pure driving talent in F1 in sort of like the last 20, 30 years, yeah, you've got to look at it. It is just amazing.
It is just an absolutely incredible race. And I think we all kind of joke that we want rain because it leads to exciting races. But I think, watched again the 98 Spar race, which essentially would have been another one of these kind of great classic drives had it not have had the incident with Coulthard. But we'll talk about that probably a little bit further. But it was his ability to be driving at a pace that none of his competitors could match, like 2, 3, 4 seconds faster than anybody else on the track. Like, you just go, if ever you need a benchmark or a note to say Michael was a level above the competition, that's it. That really truly is.
There's only really sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you're spot on. Yeah, absolutely right. If you ever want a young driver to look at, how can you know what's the ultimate wet weather performance? Yeah, you'd be hard pressed to find one better than that.
It was just an absolute incredible, and you know he would actually. I believe that Ferrari, although you know, like you said, it was a difficult car to handle, and you know it wasn't the best. It wasn't what he'd been driving at Benetton for the past couple of years. But it was the start of the project. He knew Ferrari was going to be a project. He knew that he had to build it in the way. Obviously, he'd brought Ross Brawn along with him from Benetton. And, you know, they still managed to get third in the Constructors, which I think was a pretty immense effort, I think, at that stage.
Yeah, I mean, considering his teammate was Eddie Irvine, and no disrespect to Eddie Irvine, but in '96 in particular, Ferrari was very much a one-man band in that Michael was there getting the performances in, and Irvine was, I don't know, he was there somewhere, quite a bit further down the order, not really, you know, being that's, you know, the proper supporting role that he would end up becoming in the seasons to come, but. Yeah, so 96 was very much the Michael Schumacher show at Ferrari. So yeah, to come third in the Constructors and to win 3 races and Spain 96. Yeah, that if you ever just think of Michael Schumacher's 96 season, the pole lap at Monaco and his win at Spain, yeah, it's just 2 of the truly fantastic Schumacher moments.
No, absolutely. I don't think there are enough superlatives that we can say to kind of describe this race.
Go and watch that race. F1 TV's free for a month. Go watch it. It is just amazing.
And in fairness, I think it was a vote. And it might be, I don't think, well, you know, obviously the modern classic was a Monza 2019.
I was fine with it.
It was a great race.
No, I was more than happy than playing Monza. But I think they're really desperate to get that race to be the winner, because it was the vote. It was in the first vote, but Jerez 97 won, and again we'll cover that, I'm sure, coming up, and then it's in the second vote as well. So fingers crossed, because that is a performance that people really need to see. Like fans, casual fans, you know, maybe people who haven't watched that race in the past, they need to see that performance to truly appreciate just how awesome it was. It was kind of like that era's equivalent of Hamilton's drive at Silverstone in 2008. It's on that level.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. But after, you know, a couple of clean seasons in 95 and 96, extracting that top performance and not expecting, in 1997, they'd managed to get the Ferrari into a title-winning position. Schumacher, I believe, had won 5 races that season. What are the ones off the top of my head? I'll let you jump in if you think of ones to mind. The Belgian Grand Prix, I think, again, is another one where he won again.
Yeah. In changeable conditions. Monaco in 97, when he literally, I think he ended the first lap, he was like 6 seconds ahead of everybody, and then was just made 0 mistakes apart from going on at Sandoval at one point and coming back on. Apart from that, Michael was just on again another level, like finished like a minute ahead, I think, of everybody. He won in France, he won in Canada. What was that? That's 4 then. What was the other one? And then he should have won at Silverstone. He was leading the British Grand Prix until his Ferrari let him down, so that should have been another one. Yeah, boy. Yeah, Michael's 97 season. It's a great season. It's apart from the end. Oh, in Japan, it's the 5th race.
Of course.
But I haven't got any notes in front of me. I'm literally going off this off the top of my head. Trying to remember it off the top of my head.
I know, Rob, you are the Schumi ultimate fan, so Schumi's your boy. So didn't we say this is a quiz as well as a podcast about?
Yes. Yes, it's over the years I've spent probably way too much time studying his career.
I love the fact that it is. I do have to admit, these kind of the younger years, I have to have notes because it is fresh faced. I couldn't remember as well, so it is going back off research and, well, obviously like you've done as well, rewatched, but you've watched to an extreme level, Rob, and I'm impressed.
Since the age of 6, my friend.
I think quick note on that Monaco. It was impressive because I believe that was Ferrari's first win there since 1981. So Monaco is always a special. It's a crown jewel. I know some kind of modern fans maybe won't appreciate it as much, and with now the cars getting wider and bigger as they do, even more so than the past, it kind of makes racing there difficult and more of a procession. But if you win in Monaco, that's something that someone goes, wow. And like I said, Michael did it 5 times, and this was one of them.
I mean, you have to say, to win at Monaco, you don't win Monaco on luck, unless literally the car, unless you literally break down over, like, just on the final straight and someone takes the win from there. You don't win the Monaco Grand Prix from anything other than just being absolutely the best man on the day and mastering such a tricky circuit. I mean, the cars in 97 were pretty wide as they were, and nowadays, obviously, they're even wider. But Monaco's special, and you're right, it was Ferrari's first win since Gilles Villeneuve in 81, so it was important for them to finally get a win at Monaco. So my maths is really poor, so that's what 16 years later that Michael finally got Ferrari a win around Monaco. And it always ended up being a circuit, bar maybe 1 or 2 races over the years, where he always was very, very strong at. I mean, to be fair, there weren't really many circuits where he wasn't strong at. But yeah, that Monaco victory is quite something. But yeah, Spar as well is a fantastic victory. Don't think quite as impressive as, say, his win in 95 or his win at Spain in 96. But yeah, it's kind of almost like one of those forgotten Schumacher victories, really. But it's equally as impressive as all the others.
Yeah, it was still there. if that's to say, like he's getting to that stage of his career where he's starting to set a bar, and you could arguably say that his peak years in Formula 1 were between 95 and 99. It would be difficult to say not 2000 and 2004 with the level of dominance, but some of the performances and some of the levels, and often his great races, a lot of them did come in the 90s periods, rather than necessarily the 2000s as well. But
oh no, I agree with that. I think the fact that Michael was in much inferior machinery compared to his rivals, and he was still beating them and outperforming them on a regular basis. I mean, 97, Villeneuve was in by far the best car, but made an absolute meal of that year's World Championship. Should have wrapped it up much, much sooner, really, considering the car. I would agree that between 95 and 99, Michael was the best driver in Formula 1, arguably the world at that point. And that would continue into the 2000s. But I remember him just being particularly formidable in the late 90s because the cars he was given weren't always the best.
Yeah, and we'll round off 97 with
yeah.
With that, though, obviously we did witness as fans again recently. In Jerez and Jerez.
I chose not to watch it. I was like, I'm not watching it.
Yeah.
It's difficult to watch.
Look, I think Coulthard maybe said it in terms of the controversies are part of what made Michael who he was, and that was an absolute desire to win. And sometimes when you've got an absolute desire to win, you are walking on the border of excellence and
I know
exactly,
what you're trying to
just
say.
Going too far. And 97 was another one of those cases, with what he tried to do to Villeneuve.
I think with 96 and 97, Michael were kind of almost healed, like that relationship between, say, like the people who watched F1, who were kind of almost quote unquote forgiven what he did at Adelaide in 94. I mean, as I've always kind of thought that Adelaide was not good for what Michael did, and obviously I think this was worse with Jerez. But Michael was being respected across the board, I think, more so now through his driving. He'd gone to an inferior team. He was in not as good cars as he was in Benetton, and he was now really showing his talent, and people respected him for that. But Jerez is something that if you could erase this is the moment for me that if you could erase it from his legacy, I wish I could, because this one is just embarrassing. It's not good. It is not good. And as much as Michael, I'd love to have seen Michael win another world championship as a young kid. In a way, it was almost. It taught him that you cannot do what you did that day. No matter who you are, no matter if you're Michael Schumacher or a guy at the back of the field, you can't just drive into someone thinking that'll be it. You'll both be out, or one of you will be out, and that'll be fine. Yeah, it's not good. It's a little bit embarrassing, to be honest, as a Schumacher fan. That's the only part. You're right. Coulthard said, his legacy. It's a part of his legacy. Doesn't mean that you have to like it. And I don't like Jerez 97 as a Schumacher fan. It makes me feel, a teeny bit embarrassed, to be honest.
Yeah, and if you are for some reason in the dark listening to this because you've heard the name Schumacher, but for some reason haven't stumbled across the history of him, it is, of course, that Michael, he got a loss of performance. I believe it was a coolant leak, wasn't he, in the car? And he might not have finished the race.
He dropped off. His pace dropped off substantially, and he knew he wasn't going to be able to finish. So, or at least finish ahead of Villeneuve. So he got desperate.
So as Villeneuve tried to overtake him, Schumacher tried to take Villeneuve out. Failed. I believe Martin was in the commentary of Brundle going, "You hit the wrong bit of the car there, Michael."
You hit the wrong part of him, my friend.
But oh god, it is very much not a bright spark. But maybe that's the appeal and the beauty of Schumacher, that he is human. Although he had this almost insane ability within a racing car, he was human, and he wasn't perfect.
He never was as great as he was, right? I always felt psychologically when things were getting to that really desperate, right down to where it truly mattered across an entire season's worth of racing, when it came to individual moments in time, Michael was not always the strongest. Well, when he stalled on the grid at Suzuka in '98, for example, I mean, that was partly not his fault, but he still stalled the car. Little moments like that, psychologically, when it came down to that final, this is it, you've got to go for it. Obviously, who went off at Adelaide in '94, he under no pressure at that point in the race, really, from Hill. He wasn't that close, he wasn't that far behind. He went off all on his own, made a mistake, crashed into Hill. When here, yes, the car was suffering from an issue of some kind, but Michael psychologically cracked, and it was evident as well. Just he knew he was in in trouble. I was going to say something else. He knew he was in the bleep when he was stood on the wall at the side of the circuit watching Villeneuve pass by, and you couldn't see him, but by his body language, you could just tell he was thinking, "Oh my God, what? I can't believe this has just happened." And he rightfully got disqualified from the season for it. Kept his wins, but disqualified from the season. And I, as a Schumacher fan, biggest fan going of his I can think of. I adore his career and everything, but there are the 3 moments of his career that I always kind of just go, yep, put my hands up. I cannot explain it, other than Michael Schumacher wasn't the most psychologically strong driver there's been. And this was an instance of that. Yeah.
And I think that's the perfect sum up of it, and moves it on to 98. And I suppose you kind of look at 98 as the beginning of a trilogy in terms of 98, 99, 2000. And that is, for me, those seasons were defined by his greatest rival in his career, and that was Mika Hakkinen. Adrian Newey had moved across to McLaren, the star designer, and the McLarens that he'd produced, they were a hell of a car. But Michael and Ferrari were starting to get to grips thing. They were starting to become a well-oiled machine. They were starting to give a car that Michael, merited his talent. And was an absolute hell of a battle. And 98 was the start of that.
Absolutely. This was the season that got me into Formula One. I started watching in 97, but didn't really understand truly what was going on. But I remember being completely captivated by the Schumacher-Hakkinen battle across the 98 season. I couldn't miss it. Watched every race multiple times. You'd tape them back on the old VHS tapes. People probably remember what they are. But I used to watch the races religiously. And I remember just being completely all in on the rivalry between Michael and Hakkinen. It was just amazing across the length of 98. I mean, I always think 98 is probably the most underrated season of all time. I think it's just an amazing season. Michael was awesome. The F300 was a great car, a step up from the previous two cars. It really was. Far inferior to the MP413 that Adrian Newey designed at McLaren. I mean, God, that is an awesome car, an absolute rocket ship. But Michael again showed that he really was special. He took us the second best car and nearly took the championship. I mean, that again, in terms of Michael's ability, it's just a demonstration of that ability, really, being able to take it to Hakkinen for so long.
Absolutely, and it was just such a fierce rivalry. They were just tooth and nail at each other, and there were both occasions where they slipped up and missed opportunities. Mentioned it earlier, that Spar 98 race, Hakkinen had got a great start on the first one before Coulthard's pile-up of the 13 cars, and then Hakkinen lost it at the start, but then Coulthard again, almost redemption for his teammate, backs off on the racing line, and Schumacher, and what was amazing about that, from watching it the other day, was he seemed to be driving the car pretty competently on three wheels.
I was going to say, is it that Michael beat Coulthard back to the pits on three wheels? I think that I always felt like that said it all. Like, about, if you're talking about the difference between Coulthard and Schumacher, Michael beat Coulthard back to the pits with one less wheel. I always think I always thought it was quite funny. But yeah, Spar, man, what a missed opportunity. And it almost looked like the title would slip at that point. Yeah, Spar is the one where you think, across that 98 season, Hakkinen, taken out on the first corner of the restart. Schumacher leading the vast majority of the race, had a massive lead. And what Coulthard was thinking backing off on the racing line, I mean, how people can kind of justify that is just hilarious, especially in those conditions. I mean, what on earth was he thinking? I honestly, truthfully, hand on my heart, always will admit Schumacher's fault. I always think Coulthard did that deliberately.
I inferred it when we did our classic race review on it, and I go, and it's the fact that he wouldn't, and it's got one of my favourite Coulthard anecdotes of Schumacher, when they met up the week after, and, he went, admittedly, I may have done things wrong, but, you've also got to admit some responsibility. I mean, you were the one behind who drove into me, and he was like, no. And he was like, Michael, you got to admit sometimes you're wrong. And he's like, I can't think of when I've ever been wrong.
It's just, I suspect that it was probably a little bit of tongue in cheek in that, but Michael was so, firm in his belief that he was the very best, and that, he probably did mean it as well. Like, fully, completely, completely truthfully thought, no, I have never been wrong. So, but yeah, Coulthard, come on, mate. You know you shouldn't have basically almost practically not brake checked him, but lifted off hugely in huge spray on the racing line. But yeah,
but we probably go from that was a brilliant performance and would have been probably renowned as one of his greatest races, but not to be, to the British Grand Prix, where he he did something very cheeky. Do you want to expand on that, Rob?
Well, to be fair, right? If you're talking about when he won the race in the pit lane, I mean, I have to say, circumstances leading up to that are a bit all over the place. So he overtakes, I think it's Verts and the yellows. Bear in mind, this is back in the days where you had flags. You didn't have the boards that we have now, which like you can see in the spray. The rain was utterly ludicrous on the day at Silverstone. Like I said, there's a lot of races from this time that if they'd happened now, the race wouldn't even start. Like, no way. It was just so wet. So then nothing happens for like 15 laps, and with like 3 laps to go, then the stewards decide to give Michael a 10-second stop go. They gave it to him too late in the race. They meant to give him longer to take the penalty, and Michael and Ferrari basically just went, well, sod it, we'll carry on, we'll take the penalty at the end, build up as much of a gap as we can, and we'll fight it out. And the stewards didn't really have a leg to stand on, because they for one, they gave the penalty too late in the race. I think it was even the wrong type of penalty to give. They should have given a time penalty. Because they gave it so late. If they'd given it 10 laps prior, then yeah, the stop goes fair game, go ahead. But I don't even think that what Ferrari did was all that cheeky. I thought it was quite smart, and obviously it tightened up the rules on giving race penalties late in the race again like that. It exposed a hole in the regulations. But I think all in, the Ferrari, They didn't do anything wrong in the end. It's certainly one of the most dramatic finishes ever.
I suppose that's what I mean by cheeky in terms of
right. Okay.
It's just the fact that they were going, well, you know, they highlighted it in terms of they could have quite easily gone along with the rules and been like just accepted the FIA's authority, but they were like, nope, we are going to do this. And finishing a race in the pit lane is bizarre and is a funny one, and also always a kind of funny moment, I think, to bring up in Michael's career.
Yeah, absolutely. I covered it on Everything Racing podcast. I do a section on the podcast just about Michael, because it's kind of self-indulgent on my part, because I just think Michael's story is so much bigger than one episode. But I've talked about the '98 British Grand Prix, and yeah, it's crazy. You have to laugh in a way. And on the podium, there's this quite funny photo of Michael literally like shrugging, just like on the podium, like I don't know, like it's quite a good one. But yeah, I always like that victory.
Yeah, I think it is always a funny one to go. But we mentioned it. It was the birth of the kind of rivalry between Mika and Schumacher. But you know, with Mika winning those last 2 rounds of the championships, eventually he missed out, and I think very frustrated. But by pushing that McLaren all the way was impressive in itself. That, like we said earlier, that McLaren car. What a car that was. And
it was an absolute rocket ship, that thing.
Was absolutely superb, and another testament to why Adrian Newey is, you know, just one of the greatest guys to have ever blessed F1 in terms of creating an F1
Agreed.
car.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Yeah.
1999, I suppose it's brief because it's marred by what could have been, and essentially, you know, with the title eventually coming down close between Mika and Eddie, and Mika would eventually become a 2-time world champion. I think it's widely regarded that Ferrari won their first constructors title for an absolute age. When was it? When was the last time they won the constructors?
It was a long time ago. I was just thinking this. I know their last driver's title was 79, but it's got to be. Is it like the early 8? No, it's got to be. It might even be later than that, like 77 or something like that. Oh God, what's it doing? What website is that? I just went to type in Ferrari on Google on Safari, and it started taking me to their stock page.
Right. Impressive, but
right, Constructors Championships. I'm curious myself.
It is an interesting one.
Bear with me. Ferrari. 83 was the last time they won a Constructors' Championship. So it'd been like 16 years.
So it'd been a hell of a long time, but Michael had managed to come back at the end of the season and help that. And alluding to it, basically it was at the British Grand Prix, wasn't it, that he had rear brake failure and broke both his legs.
I thought it was just his... Was it both? I thought it was
just his right.
Well, it was either his left or his right.
I'm pretty sure it was his right. But
maybe I think it was his right.
He broke his leg,
tibia and fibia. I think. Yeah. Oh, but yeah, we could argue about which leg it is. It's irrelevant. Yeah, the guy broke his leg during a season which he probably should have won the World Championship. I remember. I'll tell you a story about how I found out about Michael's leg break. I was only 8 years old, so bear this in mind. Near where I grew up, there was like a holiday park, and it had like some water slides. Going up there for the day, it was a hot summer's day here in Britain. And I was wearing my Schumacher cap, like, as I was. It was a race day. We had the race on record at home. We'll watch it when we get home. So Schumacher's crashed and broke his leg. And some woman, fully like adult woman, probably, in her 30s or 40s, comes up to an 8-year-old kid and says, "Oh, have you heard about Schumacher?" I've gone, "No." He said, "Oh, he's broke his leg. Hope the bleep dies." And my dad had strong words for this lady, and that's how I found out that Michael Schumacher broke his leg.
I mean,
which to an 8-year-old was heartbreaking, mate.
It's a unique way.
Certainly, and that's why I thought I'd bring it up.
I certainly feel that's a very interesting story. Oh my god.
But that was kind of like the public perception in Britain of Schumacher. Like, I mean, I remember seeing some footage of the crash, like amateur footage from I think a bit further back at like club, and they showed Schumacher's crash. And initially, people were cheering and jeering, and once they realised actually it was serious, and people went quiet and realised, oh, hang on a minute, maybe we shouldn't be laughing and clapping along. People didn't like Schumacher for what he'd done to Hill, and the fact that British F1 fans don't like other drivers that threaten their number one drivers, and that's the same across the board, not just Brits. I'm talking all nationalities. That just always tends to be the way. But there was still this almost like a stigma against Schumacher, and it became very apparent when people found it funny and actually sought some sort of like sick joy in seeing him break his leg.
And I mean that is horrible, but I think it's the fault of human nature that when we see someone successful, when we see someone doing well, we kind of almost want them to fail, because it brings them a little bit more down to our level, and it brings them down a little bit from the exceptional levels that they reach as a person. And I agree with that. No, I think you're spot on. I've never been of that, that way of, someone I don't like has had a crash, let's have a laugh and a right old giggle about it, especially at a time where drivers still, from time to time would get hurt. Like, even as recent as 2 years prior, Panis broke both his legs in Canada. So people could still get badly hurt in a Formula One car. And my God, if you're going to crash anywhere at Silverstone, boy, you don't want to do it at Stowe. Like, especially with a brake failure, like that is not the place. And back at that point, there was no runoff. It was all gravel. Yes, it slowed the car down. It would have been irrelevant anyway with a brake failure. But yeah, and there was a puny little bit of tyre barriers. I mean, the fact that he went essentially through the tyre wall into the concrete wall on the other side, that's what broke the leg. And he got so unlucky with that being the place to crash. But yeah, boy, that was his 99 season done. Yeah, that pretty much summed it up, and it's it's an interesting one on that front.
I mean, I always think that if he hadn't have crashed at Silverstone, he probably would have won the World Championship. And my only reasoning is he was really strong in the early part of the year, and the fact that Irvine came so damn close makes me think that if Irvine can get close, Michael would have just obliterated everybody else.
Absolutely, and I think it is the one championship that got away, but then you can maybe say that one's for Adelaide. These people always kind of say in sport, don't they, that incidents tend to balance themselves out, and maybe that was some weird fates in some sort of way, balanced it out that maybe 94 shouldn't have happened in the way that it did. Although, you know, other performances, like we said, with the disqualifications probably meant that it was maybe justified in the end. But, you know, it certainly feels like a could have been for Schumacher. And, you know, we look at Mercedes winning 6 championships, drivers and constructors back to back, and you'd certainly feel like, you know, Ferrari had done, Schumacher had raced that, Ferrari would have already achieved that, and Mercedes would have to have done the 7 drivers and constructors back to back to be an outright new record.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that rounds up the 99 season, and we've just paused. We've just had a quick chat because we've just both taken a look, and it's around about the hour and 10 mark, and we're like, we've got carried away here, Rob.
Haven't we just? It's been great, though.
It has been, and I hope you guys, obviously listening at home, are kind of absolutely enjoying this and reflecting and looking back on Schumacher. And this naturally seems a very good point to halve his career. The 90s Schumacher to then going on to the 2000 Schumacher. So what we are going to do is we're going to split this F1 Legacies into a part 1 and a part 2. So this is going to be the round off to part 1. So Rob obviously will be back for part 2. But Rob, thank you very much for participating in part 1 and reliving some absolutely brilliant Schumacher memories, because he is, well, in my opinion, the greatest of all time. If you split in modern F1, I always split the modern and classics, because I always think they're kind of they're almost different sports. Really, what you look at, but
100%
for me is the best. And having such a long and successful career, you really can get lost in the chat in what it goes through.
I mean, it's such a over 20-year career. I mean, there's so much to it. It's not like he's just random Joe. He's Michael Schumacher. There's so much to talk about. Yeah, I'm more than happy to split the conversation in two. Like you said, 99 feels like a natural conclusion to the first part, and yeah, we can pick it up and we can get into the real, you know, the meat on the bones, if you will, into the dominant phase.
Absolutely. So what we're going to do, this has come out on the Monday for you, and the following Monday for me and Rob, we will record part 2 for us tomorrow, but for you guys it will be a week. But we hope you kind of have enjoyed this part 1, but also look forward to part 2. But I'll give a quick shout out as we're halfway. It's essentially nice to kind of give it out. Please do go and check out the Everything Racing podcast. If you haven't figured out by now, Rob's a Schumacher fan.
Had you guessed?
Had you guessed? But I certainly would go and check it out, even if you're a general F1 fan, because he loves Schumacher, but he loves F1, and it is it's a brilliant podcast, and I would certainly recommend it. So I will leave links to Rob's podcast in the description below, so you guys can go and check out. But Rob, for now, thank you for coming on and joining me for part 1. I'm very much looking forward to part 2.
Likewise. Been a pleasure. Thanks very much for having me on. I'll speak to you soon.
I'll speak to you soon, buddy. But for now, you F1 fans, keep racing.